Hi, I'm John, and welcome to the EnviroHouse How To's. Today, we're going to be showing you how to build a worm bin. I brought a few pieces of equipment along so that we can get started with our worm bin. One of the pieces of equipment that you will need is going to be a home for them. It could be a simple Rubbermaid container, which you can pick up at a lot of hardware stores. If you're going to use a Rubbermaid container, you're going to need to make sure that you don't get one that's too big. One of these 7-gallon ones or around 10-gallon ones is perfect for the size of it. You also want to make sure you drill a series of holes, not just on one side, but on both sides. I'm going to ask that you avoid to go all the way around because it makes it a little on the weak side. The holes don't need to be much more than a 1/4 inch in size and maybe about a dozen of them on each side. That'll work well for the airflow. You'll also need some paper, and you're going to want to shred that. Before you put it in the bin, you're going to want to soak it. You don't want to put it in there dripping wet. You want to wring it out a little bit before you put it in there. You want to have about 6 inches of bedding material in there. And once you have that, you're about ready to start with the worms. When we're building a worm bin, we're not talking about just any worm. We're talking about red wigglers. So don't go looking for night crawlers or earthworms to use, very specifically red wigglers. They work best for us because they like to live and work at the surface of the soil, not deep down below. So in our shallow worm bins, these are going to be the best guys to work for us. So if you click on the link below, you'll find several sources for worms in our area. After we've got our worm bin ready with our holes drilled and our bedding inside, we want to go ahead and add our worms to it. Now when you get your worms, you're going to go ahead and add them as one big unit in a spot in the center of your worm bin. Put them in there and put that bedding over top of them and keep it nice and dark for them. And give them some mist so that they stay nice and moist. Remember, that skin of theirs likes that moisture, but not too much, just a light mist. Once the worms are in there, you're going to give them maybe about 4 days with nothing but the bedding materials in there. And then you're going to go ahead and add food in that very specific spot in your worm bin. And then let the worms go to town. Give them about a week and then come back and take a look and see what they've eaten and how they're doing. One of the things we want to watch out for is things that should not go into the worm bin. Things like citrus or meats or cheeses or bones are all things that don't need to go in with your worms. They'll begin to spoil and smell bad and make the whole experience unfun for you. And the worms just won't eat that stuff. I'd like to mention eggshells. If you're going to put eggshells in there, make sure you crush them up. Don't leave them whole. The worms won't eat them very well and they'll stay looking like eggshells for a long time. So give them a crush before you put them in there. When your worms are in the bin, you're going to want to use a few simple tools to keep an eye on them and move some things around. You don't want anything sharp or pointy, so I use a lot of old salad spoons or playground toys. I also keep a spray bottle around so that we can mist the worms periodically. The bin will dry out because you're going to drill holes in it for airflow, so you'll need water to keep the worms happy and also, again, to control for some fruit flies. When you're ready to put your food in, you're going to want to put it in a very specific spot in the bin. I recommend picking a corner. Put it in the corner and then take a little bit of the bedding material and cover it up. That allows the worms to be in dark and it keeps the fruit flies away. So every couple of days, you're probably going to want to pull that spray bottle out and make sure to give the worms a little misting. Always monitor the moisture level in the worm bin. You don't want it to be too wet. Soggy environments are not healthy for the worms and they'll actually start to try to climb out of the worm bin. And if it's too dry, then they just go deeper and deeper and deeper looking for the moist spots in the bin. So if you have a spray bottle around, keep it labeled properly so that everybody knows it's water, and mist them every couple of days at a bare minimum. Every time you feed them, you should mist the entire bin. And always, as usual, put that bedding back over the top, keeping those worms in a nice dark spot, maintaining the moisture, keeping the fruit flies away. If you do happen to overwater your worm bin and notice that there's kind of a buildup of water, like it almost pools in a side, you can always drain the bin by using the lid as a block for the material that comes out. And then you're going to want to hold off on watering for a few days or at least one full feeding to make sure that it gets back. And then you can always turn things around, sift the pile, fluff it up a little bit with your spoons to make sure that the excess moisture has a chance to absorb into some of the other materials as well. Now that we've got our worms in here and we've given them their first feeding, you're going to want to put your worm bin someplace instead of just out in the open or on the kitchen table. There are a few places that you can put it, which could be under a cabinet. If you have a basement, you can put it in the basement. A garage works really well. Places to watch out for are anywhere that's outside where it could possibly freeze. They don't like temperatures below 40 degrees. And also, in the summer, anywhere that's going to be in direct sunlight all day, because they don't like it to be much over 80 degrees. So you got to find a spot, if it's going to be outside, that's going to be somewhat protected from freezing and protected from direct sunlight all day long in the summer months. An inside spot can work, but everybody in the house has to agree on that though. Now that you've got your worm bin in its location, you've got your food in there and your worms in there, it's time to start thinking about repeat feedings. They say that worms will eat their weight in food every single day. I've found that worms don't move that fast at all. They probably need several days, maybe 4, maybe 5 days. So if you put your food in specific spots for about a month, feeding them about once a week, 5 to 7 days, that'll give you an idea how fast they eat in those specific spots. And then after that month, you can put it anywhere you want as long as you're keeping it covered with that bedding material. Every once in a while, you're going to want to add some paper to cover up food or to increase the bedding as it begins to shrink down and down and down. So keep a supply of shredded paper material around. Again, it could just be the newspaper that's been sitting out there for a while. Cut it up, soak it, and then add it to your bin as necessary. So it's been about a month. The bedding's all gone, the food's all gone, and it looks like there's a bunch of dirt in there. The dirt, that's called worm castings. That's all the food and bedding that's been digested. And now it's time for you to get that goodness out of there. How do you do that? Well, you're going to have to actually take the whole bucket and on a tarp or an open space, tip it over. Then what you can do is shine a light on that pile of worms. And what it does is it drives the worms down into the center of the pile. And then you can go ahead and get a pair of rubber gloves or your soft, non-pointed tools. And you can begin to separate that worm dirt, those castings, off of the worms until you get all the way down to the point where it's just a big pile of worms, similar to what we have going on here. Once you have the worms all together, there may be a few that stay behind, but most of them are gathered up. And if a few get into the new pot that it goes into or out back in the yard, no harm in that. It's okay. They'll just find it and make it a new home. So separate your worms by dumping them onto a pile, shine some light, and then shed those castings off. Collect your castings in a container, a bag, a bucket, and then use them as you like. Once we've gathered our worms from their castings and we're ready to use the castings, we have these worms that are ready to go back into their container and start the whole process all over again. So you're going to want to fill that bedding back up to that 6-inch layer, make sure the moisture is just right. Go ahead and put your worms in there. This time you probably don't need to wait a few days. Go ahead and put some food in right away for them. They're already an eating machine and ready to go. And then so long as you're always making sure that you're getting worms back into the bin, you probably can repeat this cycle for a long time. How many years? I don't know. If the worms are happy enough, they'll always grow a new generation inside that bin all on their own. Hey, I'm John. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to our playlist and give us a thumbs up if you liked it, or give us a comment below. Thanks a bunch. Whatever you do, keep doing the best you can.